The BMW S1000XR is a proven sports tourer with a great reputation for balancing fun and practicality. But at over £16,000 starting price, you're probably going to want to be pretty sure about it before you buy one. Thankfully, we've been borrowing this 2024 model for the past couple of weeks, as well as trawling the internet for as many owners' reviews as possible. And so in this video, we'll go through the 11 key things that you need to know before you buy one. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Karoos for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. Karoos is an awesome motorcycle-specific route planning app that uses their own dedicated moto algorithm to find the best possible twisty routes so you never have to ride a boring road again. You can simply give it a distance and a direction, plus how curvy you want the route to be, and it'll do all the work to give you a round trip. Or you can go point to point if you're touring, for example, and choose from the quickest routes to the most fun. I love using Karoos to explore new areas as well as mix up my regular local loops, and so I thoroughly recommend checking out the link down in the description below. Plus, you'll also find down there a code for a free trial, as well as a discount if you decide to take out their premium membership. Now, almost universally amongst owners, the most commonly mentioned positive thing about this bike has to be the inline-4 engine, which makes bags of power at 170 horsepower peak, and it's nice and revvy too. That means it's capable of everything from touring to track days, and it absolutely tallies with my experience of riding it out on the road, where it barely ever fails to put a big grin on your face. Plus, you've got some of that sports bike feel with the inline-4 engine character and sound, and so that helps to make the bike feel exciting to ride, especially when you consider it's set against this relatively comfortable riding position. The only downside, I guess, is that it doesn't have masses of bottom end and low rev grunt, and again that's mentioned by quite a few owners in their reviews. But look, for me that's just part and parcel of it being an inline-4. It's not a specific criticism of this bike, just one of the facts of this particular engine configuration. And with all things in the motorcycle world, there's always a trade-off. If you've got great top-end revvy power, it's probably going to be at the sacrifice of grunt elsewhere. For me, I still think there's a reasonable enough mid-range to make it a fairly practical bike to ride, and it's nice and smooth on the throttle in the mid to low revs. But if you're someone who doesn't like to hang on to the gears much and likes a bit of a kick down low in the revs, then you're probably better off with something like a GS. Overall though, on balance, I'd say the engine remains, a strong point of this bike, and it's only enhanced by the Akrapovic silencer, which is part of the M pack that's fitted to this particular bike, and also the quick shifter, which I think is part of the dynamic pack. Now this is another feature that seems really popular with owners because it's crisp and accurate, and also adds to that sensation of riding a superbike powered armchair. Now that sort of sporty story continues down here with the brakes, with a set of 4-piston radially mounted Brembo calipers on nice big 320mm discs, and that ability to scrub off speed quickly and the very sporty braking setup is another thing that's mentioned amongst owners. Now previous to borrowing this particular press bike, I was actually on the M bike version, the M1000XR, and that one gets proper superbike level brakes in the form of their M brakes, which you'll notice are sort of anodized blue. Now those are very aggressive and sharp on the bite, and so what I will say about the brakes on the S1000XR is I actually like that they're still very strong and have plenty of feel, but also a little bit more gradual and usable day to day. Personally, I think if you're just doing general town riding or commuting or touring, especially if you've got a pillion on the back, these just allow you to be that little bit smoother. Now I think it's since the 2020 update of this particular bike that their dynamic ESA, so their semi-active electronically adjustable suspension, has been fitted as standard, and this is something that a lot of people really do seem to like. Up front you've got this upside down Marzocchi fork and then the Marzocchi monoshock at the rear, and with both of them, damping can be varied in real time to suit your particular riding style and also the current road conditions. Now on top of that, you can also choose from 2 modes through the switchgear and dash, so you've got road or dynamic, and road is generally going to give you a slightly softer feel that biases more so towards comfort, whereas dynamic will firm things up and is better suited to sportier riding. For me, that sort of versatility is ideally suited to a versatile kind of bike like this, where you might well be going between touring and commuting in the week and then over to those quicker group rides at the weekend. And so you can pretty much always find the ideal suspension setup without having to even get off the bike. Then you've also got automatic preload, which will get the bike level regardless of whether you're riding solo or two up or with luggage or both. And it also has stuff like anti-dive, which firms up the fork under braking. So look, lots of power and handling and braking and performance abilities, but I think the real beauty of this bike is how it juxtaposes that with a really very comfortable riding position. So if you're somebody who wants that sort of sports bike riding experience, but you can't handle the lowness of the clip-on handlebars, then realistically, this is probably going to be the answer that you've been looking for. There's plenty of room from the seat down to the pegs, so your knees are nice and open. The seat's been made slightly larger for 2024, so it is fairly comfortable. And also you've got this really wide and upright handlebar position that keeps you back nice and straight. On top of that, you've got plenty of room for a passenger, some decent grab rails, and so all round for everybody involved, this is a super comfortable bike that's also really quick. Now, the only potential party pooper in terms of comfort for previous generations anyway was some of the engine vibrations which had come up through the seat and bars. Generally, I'd say you'd expect an inline-4 to be pretty comfortable, but I think it was widely known that this particular engine in this particular bike was a little bit irritating, especially over decent motorway miles. Fortunately, in 2017, they changed the handlebars to make them rubber mounted. You'll see that if you pull up and down on them, you'll see the risers and mounts moving ever so slightly. And from what I can tell, it seems to have done the trick because there aren't really any mentions of this discomfort in more recent owners' reviews. And also on this particular 2024 bike, I haven't really noticed any truly irritating vibes. I mean, it does still buzz a little bit, but it's no worse than any other bike really, and I'd say for 2024, it's perfectly acceptable. Now, another thing they changed for 2024 was the seat height. They brought it up by 10 millimeters, which brings it in at 850 as standard, and there's no adjustability with this stock seat. And thing is, while it's not necessarily a massively heavy bike at about, I think it's 226 kilograms curb, it does seem to lean over quite a bit when it's on the side stand. I don't know if that's just because the side stand is relatively short or the fact that the automatic preload is fully maxed out when the engine's turned off, but I have noticed it's relatively difficult to pick up off the stand for a bike of this sort of weight. That's only going to get more difficult when you've got it loaded up with luggage, especially if all the cases are full. And so if you are around my height at 5'9" or 175 centimeters, you might want to look into one of the lowering options, especially if you're not really used to tall bikes. In the accessories catalog, there's a low seat option, which I think takes 20 mil off the total height. And you could also combine that with the suspension lowering kit, which takes another 30 off, and combined that would bring it down to a much more easy to manage 800 mil. Now, I mentioned that this press bike has the M pack fitted, which I think is about $3,000 and gets you a bunch of nice goodies like the M-style paint job, lightweight forged wheels, the Akropovich silencer, a lap timer, a lightweight battery, and their endurance chain. But perhaps one feature I'm not that keen on is this sport windscreen. I mean, while it is still adjustable, it sits very low and seems to be only biased towards aesthetics with a bit of a look of the M1000XR. Wind protection is fairly minimal, and for me I'd probably rather stick with the standard screen, or potentially even look into that taller touring windscreen, which I think comes in around 200 quid. It's always a little bit of a tricky one working out what's part of what pack on the BMW configurator, but personally I would hope that if I'm paying near to 17 grand for the bike, then another 3 grand for the M pack, that I'd at least not have to pay that 200 quid to revert back to a decent windscreen. In fact, I think I might be tempted to save that money from the X-Pack and use it to buy the full 3-piece luggage, which would turn this thing into a seriously quick touring weapon. The only complaint that I've read about these though is the fact that they're relatively expensive, and if you look at the 2 plastic side cases plus the biggest top box option and the rack that's needed to fit it, you are looking at close to 1700 quid. And so on the one hand, I do understand that that is quite a lot of money, but also I compared it to something like a Ducati Multistrada V4, which is a similar style of bike, and for the same setup of 3-piece plastic luggage, it comes in around 1500 quid. So the BMW, like owners say, does seem to be a little on the expensive side, but it's not more than a couple of £100 difference. Now the other thing to mention from owners' reviews would be the servicing costs, with both the annual service and the major 18,000 mile service both coming up as rather expensive. And it's a little bit of a difficult one for me to advise on because of course the servicing costs are going to vary massively based upon your region, and our channel's watched by people all over the world. But from what I could see from some of the prices quoted in these reviews, it seemed fairly comparable to what I'd pay for my Tiger 800's annual service at a Triumph main dealer. Now of course if you get it serviced by a smaller independent garage, that's probably going to cut the cost, but I know a lot of people, especially with a bike this valuable, would prefer to have that official BMW dealer stamp in the service book. And so all I will say is if that does sound like you and running costs are a major concern, then it's probably worth giving your local dealer a call to get an idea of servicing costs before you pull the trigger. So that, my friends, rounds off everything I've learned about this bike after borrowing it for the past couple of weeks, but do let me know down in the comments below if you think there's anything I've missed. Also, if you fancy something a little more spicy, then I'll leave my review of the M1000XR on the screen now in case you haven't watched it already. Do hit subscribe as well if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB, and massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.